Each event is preceded by prophecy, but without the hero, there is no event. No more terrible a disaster could befall your people than for them to fall into the hands of a hero. There is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors. In the Conan universe, which we usually cover on this channel, there is a distinct advantage over most other settings, that being the titular hero's original 21 stories, which thematically drives me in the right direction when I get lost in the universe. In moments of doubt, I merely have to ask, what would happen in a Conan story? This mentality is very useful when exploring the farther edges of that universe, which we often do on this channel. However, Dungeons & Dragons will always put much more onus on the DM and players in question when dealing with the elements present. Due to this, I will frequently reference the Prism Pentad book series by Troy Denning, media that took inspiration from Dark Sun, such as The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind, and inspirations for Dark Sun, such as Edgar Rice Burroughs' Princess of Mars or Frank Herbert's Dune. I encourage you to as well. This list will cover the races for both 2nd and 4th edition, while also including those not fleshed out but mentioned as canon. We'll be supplementing with information from Athas.org and mainstream D&D to help you with your character creation today. Specification will be given when homebrewing is present. All our sources are clearly labeled below. Now let's find out just exactly who you are as we begin. Grimdark. Half off! Due to the wars of extermination that sought to wipe out most of the non-human races, later to be revealed as a plan to wipe out humans as well by the first sorcerer, the mutant Pyrene, Rajat, many beings were vanquished, never to be seen again. Pyrene are a race of magical nomads said to have blood which contributed to all the races of Athas. Each of Rajat's champions were named for their task of wiping out one of the impure races. Of these, the Curse of the Kobolds, Bane of Gnomes, Orc Plague, Ogre Doom, Pixie Blight, Wymek Annihilator, and Troll Scorcher were successful in their respective genocides. Devas would go extinct through similar means at the hands of a wicked baron's magical experiments. Once Rajat's true plans to eradicate humans as well were discovered, his champions would turn against him. DMs are encouraged by the 2nd edition core book to add to this list of extinct races. In the remaining majority human world that Athasians live in, class is everything, the lowest status of which is slavery. A person can become a slave by birth depending on who their parents were, the law of the city-state they're in, and any form of serious debt. This debt can be criminal or solely financial in nature. Usury-influenced debt slavery by loan sharks would be a common practice for those looking to make a killing in the flesh trade. Treatment of slaves varies by culture, but most are considered to be the property of their masters. Among slaves, the most famed role is that of gladiators, who are the warriors for entertainment in many a great civilization. Fights to the death would be common for the entertainment of the masses, which keeps them anesthetized to thoughts of rebellion. Escaped slaves may join the raiding tribes of the barren wilds, who resort to banditry to stay alive in many cases, since they do not possess the trade skills for anything else. This is, of course, one of the many moral justifications for the practice. Slaves are always many in number where the tradition is kept, and can easily make up the majority of a civilization. For those who hate the practices of civilization and are willing to trade harsher circumstances for a solitary inner peace, becoming a hermit is for the best. Of course, some hermits are merely those sentenced to exile from their civilizations, which, depending on the geography in question, can be worse or better than slavery. What may be a blessing for those wishing to escape Tyr, which is surrounded by harsh but traversable desert, may not be so for those seeking to leave a different location, which is surrounded by deep, muddy plains that have similar properties to quicksand. To survive, a hermit must keep any source of water and their residence hidden from plain sight. They live underground when possible, but also in caves or simply adopt camouflage as a common practice in their lifestyle. Many a defiler may be found in this social class due to them being exiled from a village for the good of the crops. While the circumstances may be harsher, like in many a world, the trade remains the same: independence for intense suffering. Within the city-states, for both slaves and free men, literacy is outlawed for most peoples. Even a free citizen is subject to the oppression of the corrupt authorities and wicked rulers of their land. These can be mercenaries or entertainers, but are usually artisans. This means builders, carpenters, and basket weavers, anyone whose skills involve handcrafting in some way that are necessary to a civilization. These free men, without these skills, may soon find themselves as slaves if they don't keep their head down and prove their worth to society. While initially part of the free man category, we've given merchants their own section because of one great advantage they have over other free men. Without an ounce of noble blood, these privileged workers are allowed to learn to read, write, and calculate. While usually outlawed for the risk of others learning magic, which has a vampiric effect on life in the world of Athos, these free men must have this knowledge to operate their businesses, thus to be of service to those who rule over them. Extremely wealthy merchants in a city-state without a Sorcerer King may end up marrying into noble families, securing their position and privileges in society. Those who rule over them being the Templars. Templars are the traditional law enforcement in every city-state and gain magical powers to further their authority from the Sorcerer King they serve. In civilizations without a Sorcerer King, they merely act as judges, jury, and executioners for their respective city-states. These are the reasons that many free men soon find themselves in positions of slavery. In other cases, crossing one may cost you your life. How corrupt a Templar is can usually be judged by whether or not they serve a Sorcerer King, but many fall to corruption regardless. Noble families consider it to be a boon of goodwill to have a Templar in their bloodline. Where a Sorcerer King isn't present, noble families may control a Templar's will with their power over their scarce farmland and sources of water. Due to their stewardship over these resources and their ancestral ties to their local civilization, power broking is inherent to their existence. A merchant may soon find themselves out of work, then into the status of free man, soon to be a slave, should he cross such a family. Likewise, noble families being indebted to a person may soon find themselves marrying up in status. An easy way to stop feudalism from developing with rich merchants is to simply have the two families marry into each other, solidifying both of their power. Of course, this power is rendered irrelevant in the face of a Sorcerer King, whose presence would likely solidify a more strict hierarchy and whose intense taxation would cause the risk of feudalism to die quickly, as no merchant could ever attain such a status. Sometimes viewed as living gods, but always viewed as powerful ageless masters of the arcane, these royal individuals are ancient. They have taken the form of dragons in some cases, through dark rituals taught to them by Rajat, who they served as his champions during the Wars of Extermination. Using these powerful forms, which draw magic not from Athos, but from cursed obsidian orbs inside their bodies, they can bestow magical powers they cannot use themselves onto their Templar enforcers. One of the reasons that magic is so outlawed in any city-state ruled by them isn't just for the good of the food supply, but also so that none may rival their power. The usual kind of magic one would find would be known as defiling, which carelessly takes life from Athos while also causing physical pain to the living beings around the caster to empower their spells. However, for every 10 evildoers, there is one who chooses the light side of magic by becoming a preserver, who seeks to live in harmony with the flora of the world in exchange for less powerful spells, often having to take energy from one's own life force to a limited degree, which can be replenished through simple rest, food, and water. As a preserver, your very existence is outlawed in city-states, as well as most villages. The only safe haven you will likely find is one of the many underground chapters of the Veiled Alliance, charged with the duty of protecting their order, along with its adjacent allies called auxiliaries, and combating the dark side of magic in the form of defilers. These enemies of the Sorcerer Kings live lives of constant duty. The psychic powers that all Athasians naturally possess are regulated in different ways depending on the city-state in question. Being commonly referred to as the Way, psionic powers are like a mental muscle that are sometimes just as useful as vestigial organs and other times make the difference between life or death. Whether a person wants their mutant mastery to aid them in fight or flight, they will have to learn of its complex nature, often discovering new abilities as they train appropriately. To attend a well-known psionic university, they will need to be from a high-status family, like wealthy merchants or nobility. In some cases, these universities can be headed by Sorcerer Kings themselves, carefully guiding students with philosophical teachings to mimic their own view of the world as they grow in power. These are those select people being groomed to one day become Templars or other agents of their specific city-state. Without training, a particularly powerful psionic talent could easily fly out of control, costing many, including the psionicist in question, their lives. This is the case for many who do not receive proper training due to their status of birth. Experiences outside of city-states vary greatly. Often acting as clients of the city-states are the various villages that populate the rural wastes. Where there is an independent village, there is a valuable resource or important trade route. All of this is then tied together with an easily defensible military position due to geography. This can be a narrow passage flanked by 2 cliffs, or a village built into the side of a mountain in a classic adobe style. Many escaped slaves can be found here when the village is not the territory of another power. Slave villages are the shanty towns of Dark Sun, appearing then disappearing overnight with the sole purpose of temporary housing and shade from the sun. As the name would imply, nomads are those people who live life on the go. Survival is even harder for them than it is for hermits. By moving from place to place, these are the true survivalists of the land. They can be bounty hunters, slavers, or simply part of a traveling caravan. It would be easy for these people, who choose this path, to avoid the limitations on literacy and magic, as they never stay in one place for too long. If you want to maintain your independence from tyrants while gaining more information about alien worlds, you'll need this video's sponsor, the Bizarchives. The Bizarchives is an independent weird fiction company publishing the same genres that inspired the setting we're talking about today, like sword and sorcery, biopunk, as well as epic fantasy. Even if you can't afford a product right now, for the small price of your email address, you can sign up to the Bizarchives Substack. There, you'll get access to articles on these same subjects written by authors in those same genres. A link to the main website can be found above the source list in the description box below. These stories make a great source of inspiration for all your campaign ideas. This is the Bizarchives, weird tales of monsters, magic, and machines. After you get inspired by the Bizarchives, you'll feel like ordering miniatures. So you'll need our second sponsor, who makes 3D models for Warhammer Fantasy, 40k, and more, which of course easily is adaptable for the Dark Sun or Conan setting. Ronin Kraft is an independent 3D printing service with a very high rating on Etsy. This creator always keeps in good contact with his clients and keeps people up to date on his order schedule. With Ronin Kraft, you can always be sure you're getting quality so good it transcends any master. In the Tier region, where most campaigns take place, there is one remaining true forest. The reason this land has not been colonized by humanity is because of the tropical traps of ancient ruins, horrid undocumented beasts far more dangerous than their desert counterparts, and above all else its sentient denizens, the mutated dysgenic descendants of the once dominant people of Athas. This once pure race, so favored by Rajat that his end goal was to turn the world back over to them, are now a chaotic shadow of their former selves. Living in a myriad of broken groupings led by chieftains or pack leaders, a halfling raid is not done for a clear purpose. Once assaulting a newly formed close village trying to take advantage of proximity to the forest for its water and crops, the raid ends when the leader decides they have gotten something from the raid. This can be as long as a few days or as short as an hour. It is a misunderstanding that these people are cannibals, as they do not eat other halflings. Humans, elves, and other races, however, make a tasty meal. These halflings are true mutants. Some have elongated limbs, others have elf-like pointed ears, and even still, many resemble smaller versions of extinct goblins or trolls due to their numerous deformities. A tall halfling is around 3.5 feet in height and weighs around 60 pounds. Halfling lifespans are around 120 years, and they have a great sense of racial solidarity. Their tribes, villages, and other communities resolve all political disputes when possible to preserve their unity in the interest of survival. A common theme in all their subcultures is a racial pride in their agility, short size, and ability for stealth. Rajat's deformities would have been considered odd in his time, but in many ways he could be considered the father of not just the modern world, but also more directly what modern halflings would become. Culturally, every race on some level can be thought of as a creation of this once over-socialized, now savage people. Equally culpable for the fate of the modern age would be humans. Through the wars of extermination, they are now the most populated race by far on the planet. Every mutation talked about for halflings can equally apply to the humans of Athas. This includes things like webbed toes, pointed ears like many other races, gray skin, and other odd deformities. This was the race that would make up Rajat's champions. They also mated with many other races, either as part of passionate affairs or wicked experiments, to create the half-races of the world. As always in fantasy settings, humans are where our real-world historical influences meet the world of the fiction in question. This is observed from the cultural influences in the various city-states, all of which are dominantly populated by humans. Greco-Roman culture was a great inspiration for the marble city of Balak. Phoenician or ancient Egyptian culture heavily influenced the city of Tyr. Draj is known for its Aztec influence, and Ram takes much of its aesthetic from ancient India. Humans are, of course, more likely to be of every social class due to their numbers. There isn't a high racial solidarity of humans given their extreme variety of cultures found throughout the world. A great example of a human would be the High Templar villain of the Prism Pentad series, Tithian, his power-hungry nature leading him to delusions of grandeur which eventually seal his fate. This reflects the dog-eat-dog, desperate social climbing nature of the humans in Athasian society. The threat of slavery always looming over their heads, just as the minuscule possibility of a wealthy, easy life is dangled in front of them should they become wealthy merchants or marry upwards. Ranging anywhere from 4.5 to 5 feet tall are the squat, body-built, and hairless dwarves. Survivors of the champion, who would later become the only true dragon, known as Boris, modern dwarves are totally void of magic. Chief among their unique qualities, like Tieflings, is evidence of an alternate afterlife to dissolving into the gray which separates Athos from the gods. As a matter of both their nature and culture, every one of them must select a strict long-term goal called a focus. A focus drives them forward in life and gives them purpose. Their emotional state, thought process, and logical view of the world is extremely altered depending on the focus. If a dwarf dies without completing it, then they become a banshee. A banshee is similar to a wraith, which can manifest in the physical world, but must return to the gray to recharge. However, this brand of undead is wholly connected to the physical world. As one can imagine, this is the fate of most of their kind, and it might actually be a better one than literally dissolving or being taken into the gray, from which you have to assume the point of a wraith. We have to remember, this isn't being compared to a Judeo-Christian form of heaven and hell. This is being compared to literally becoming nothing. There they are doomed to haunt the site of their failure for all eternity, until released by being vanquished by a worthy foe. This is augmented by the tunnel vision-like focus all dwarves have in life. It is said that the only things that can make them truly happy are working and fighting for their focus. Dwarves congregate in tribes or villages in different solitary areas of the world. While information on their society is not given, it is said that they are at home below and above ground, as well as making a point of them not being nomadic. They are also known as one of the few races that has access to metal. Therefore, we can assert a practical tribal structure revolving around the mining of adamantine ore to make their fabled dwarven steel. Dwarven slaves are used for 3 things: using their titanic strength in the gladiator pits, their determination in mining operations, and their seed for breeding stock to create muls. Muls are slave-bred half-human, half-dwarves who stand at a ridiculous 6 to 6.5 feet in height on average, with boundless muscle. Their dwarven blood gives them their complete hairlessness and super-physiological physique, while their mutated human blood gives them their pointed ears and increased height. Their skin is anywhere from a pale white to a copperish bronze. Most grow up in extremely cruel slavery, every day of their childhood being spent in intense combat, preparing for lives as the perfect gladiators or slave soldiers. However, a childhood of brutal abuse breeds extreme rebellion. A great example of this is the main character of the Prism Pentad series, known as Rikus. Originally a gladiator, he escaped and would go on to lead armies against the city-state of Uruk to prevent an ancient evil from overtaking the land. If not for the fact that most are sterile, they would have easily become the dominant race of the planet. Just as Muls are half dwarves, Goliaths are half giants. Unlike Muls, this crossbreeding was done magically by an unknown sorcerer long ago. As a result, Goliaths are common in the same areas where both humans and giants live near the Silt Sea. Around 12 feet in height, and just like Muls, bounding with Hulk-like muscle to match their insane height at over twice the size of mortal men, weighing around 1,600 pounds as adults, they would easily conquer the world, but are held back by one thing: their intellect is insanely small. To the few smart enough to create a culture, they usually adopt the culture of the humans of the surrounding area instead. What makes them tragic figures in the treacherous world of Athos is that they have a usual nature of truly being gentle giants, overly optimistic people-pleasers in a world of Machiavellian misanthropes. They are very often disfigured at a higher rate than pure humans or giants. Their faces can appear misshapen, uneven, or crooked, while their facial features in general tend to be incredibly exaggerated as a racial trait. chins, forehead, lips, and noses are all proportionately larger than they would be on a human of the same size. An element of their ill-formed identities is their incredibly impressionable nature, being the definition of a man-child or follower. If a charismatic or dominant personality presents itself around them, they will very quickly adopt personality traits from the person in question in an act of practical parody but intentional flattery. The Mantis folk are the only race that did not culturally descend from Halflings, actually enjoy the environment of Athos, and in some cases have means of travel beyond the gray. Their body plan consists, on average, of a majority bug-like body with 4 semi-humanoid arms. They have a poison bite, can camouflage themselves to blend in with their environment, and have a psychic sense of direction. They vary greatly in biology, with even the resting color of their exoskeleton also being the color of their blood, but are more separated by culture and level of education. Although all Kreen agree that non-Kreen taste fairly good, with halflings and humans being considered particular delicacies. There are the clutches of the savage Thri-Kreen, which roam the ranges of southern Tyr, the few civilized Tohr Kreen underground cities near the north. Beyond that, there are the Tohr Kreen nations, each one being comprised of a different biological subgroup of them, and even further to the north, almost a legend to those not of the insectoid race, is the Kreen Empire, ruled by their own master Psionic Emperor, simply known as the Hazi, or Leader of Change. It is in this empire that incorporates biologically engineered new types of insect folk, as well as alliances with races unknown, to solidify the well-being of and act as the homeworld for all Kreen. Through unique mixtures of technology and psionics, the civilized Kreen of the Empire have possibly the only way off of Athos in relation to the wider multiverse. However, as we said, these literal bugmen who need very little water or sleep love the barren world. One of the reasons that they were not targeted by any war of extermination is that they simply didn't have the environment to diversify and prosper in the Blue Age. Instead of using it to escape the planet, it is best theorized that they use it to recruit or call for help, also acting as rescuers to talented Thri-Kreen of other worlds who've proven themselves as unusually intelligent, thus an aid to the Empire. In the Empire and the Tohr Kreen nations, the genetically modified Kreen who modify others are known as Zik-Chill, when bred for priestly activity, that is, and Zik-Trin when bred for war, acting as mantis folk super soldiers and elite guards to the Hazi while also being religious leaders. Leaders of Tohr Kreen nations are known as Lathu-Kaz, who Zik-Chill will protect, as these nations have also adopted the practice of engineering or breeding them. They are priests of the Kreen Emperor, who, like many powerful living beings, is worshipped as a god upon the earth. The god Emperor of Mantis kind also seems to have his mandibles deep into the nations to his south as well. This is not to be confused with the traditions of the Thri-Kreen, which are largely atheistic. And again, those are the savage mantis folk to the further south. They're also much more common than what we're talking about now. Zik-Chill are usually depicted as the truest form of mantis folk, resembling very simply giant mantises on steroids with extra appendages or psionic abilities bred into them, designed to both protect and increase the power of the Hazi, who himself, as the Emperor, implicitly gains power psychically the more Kreen are around him. This unique mutation would explain both the creation of the Zik-Chill and the reason for multiversal travel to happen at all, as both are ways to increase the power and might of the Leader of Change. Tohr Kreen nations consist of large states that started as packs called Kaluks. The word Haz usually denotes a type of leader. Haz in rank go down from Lathuk, highest leader, so Lathu-Kaz, Kaluk, leader of most packs, Kaluk-Kaz, and finally Gotok-Kaz would be a leader of a single pack, with average Tohr Kreen being referred to as common Gotok. A hunting pack is referred to as a kek. You might say that the Gotok-Kaz is top kek. Tohr means civilized, thus Tohr Kreen simply means the mantis folk of higher organization, and Thri means nomadic or hunter, meaning more tribal or primitive Kreen. Thri-Kreen society is much more simple, as it revolves around the concept of a clutch. After being hatched into existence and taught to fight, the Kreen in question must form a surrogate familial bond with a Darwinistic morality called a clutch. Once emotionally imprinted on or in admiration of another being, regardless of race, they will seek to form a bond with them. This will cause them to have the same feelings towards that person that they would towards a family member. This has often been used against them, causing them to become easily enslaved. However, having a mantis friend might not be as fun as it's cracked up to be. They show affection by encouraging each other to be strong by Kreen standards. This means they consider sleep a form of weakness or laziness, and drinking enough water for a human to stay alive to be gluttonous or wasteful. While having a hive mentality when operating in groups, their societies, as we have just went over, do not resemble those of bugs, but rather of the organized alien peoples that they are. The first type of Tohr is known as a Jeral, which are notably large in body, around 7 feet tall as opposed to the usual 5 or 6 feet, with an imperial sensibility who look down on the Thri-Kreen as they live closest to the south, thus have many nomadic neighbors. Physically, it should be noted that they have no antenna, unlike most Kreen who use them to communicate their mood. This makes them inherently more stoic and judgmental than their sister cultures in the south. Their hands also possess 2 fingers and 1 thumb as a unique digit structure. The Jez subspecies of Tohr Kreen have a distinct cockroach or black ant influence to their design, and their most unique feature is their mouths. A large series of fangs occupy a super flexible hole which is used to masticate all manner of inedible substances to normal Kreen. They are deeply obsessed with legalities, but this is usually in the direction of being able to challenge someone to a duel or declare war, as these matters, like with Dwarves, bring them a great sense of self-fulfillment culturally. It can be said that their mix of legal and combat focus amounts to what humans would call an honor culture. Possessing the same odd hands as the Jeral, but being fairly short at around 4.5 feet tall, are the vibrant red Tohr known as the Jhol. Having a very fire ant influence to their design, they are also the only Kreen with human-shaped legs rather than anthropomorphized insectoid ones. This is because they are specialized for flat stony plains rather than the usual desert sands. Their main export as a nation is clothing and tools, having special access to metal which is fairly rare on the planet. Like the Jez, they have a warrior culture, but instead of developing an imperial honor culture, most are very prone to scraps or brawls. Violent crime can be assumed to be very high in Jhol nations, as when they leave, they will often become bandits for the sport and feeling of domination over others that comes from winning in a fight to the death. This can be inferred by the fact that they love watching but hate the idea of ever becoming gladiators. They instead hold their own forms of hyper-competitive Olympic-style games and fights to the death in their own arenas, which are famous throughout Kreen society. These are also the only type of Kreen known to not have a poison bite. The first type of Thri is that of the Toksa, who are the southern neighbors of the Jeral. They are the most common type of mantiskin to be encountered in the Tyr region. They're usually yellow-green in color and far more violent in nature. They are known to be highly chaotic, indicating a prevalent mental illness among them. The Tkeech Thri are true praying mantises, known for their deep respect for all things nature. As we've said many times, powerful beings such as elementals or genii often take the place of gods in this setting. The white-striped green Tkeech present an interesting archetypal variation on the alien bug folk. Their overdeveloped religious instinct and deeply element-connected nature making them great pairings for an intense cult dynamic. They notably are immune to many of the same diseases that affect other Kreen, such as infections or types of rot, and live hidden near various types of oasis. Though they are considered Thri, they very rarely leave a source of natural life, which informs their morally natural view of the world, as well as their likelihood to be monks or druids. The final and rarest type of Thri are known as the Tondi, whose design was heavily influenced by the orchid mantis. Their culture could be thought of as a more reclusive and esoteric version of the Tkeech. The living domains or ranges of a Tondi are marked by the presence of the growing of pink and white owini flowers, which give their children their appearance once hatched. Like the Tkeech, they are neutral and tend to be druids, but also take a more advanced scientific view to herbalism. They have become experts in getting owini flowers to grow, even in the rocky badlands they often share with the hyper-aggressive Tohr known as the Jhol. Coming from a tradition of ancestor worship and isolationism, the Elves of Athas live lives of mercantile opportunism driven by an inhuman lust for knowledge. Elven names, which sound to us like eldritch oddities, translate to animistic meanings. Goti meaning outsider, Udran meaning half-elf, and Uranu meaning an elf with no tribe. Elven names emphasize a connection to nature. Dukoiti means wind fighter, Botu means water runner, and Haka, or Huka, means fire leaper. Functional madness with the creeping promise of neurotic insanity is inherent to the Elven mindset. They have a bipolar nature, often switching from a childlike, carefree mentality very quickly into a harsh view of justice or revenge that must be carried out. These contradictions are held intact by the in-the-moment emergent state of Elven psychology. Thinking about the past or future confuses and annoys them, but spur-of-the-moment obsessions with new knowledge act as a soothing balm for their ever-impending mental breakdowns. When one fuses this with the economic demands an elf makes on themselves on behalf of furthering their direct family if they live in a city-state, personal business like many young elves taken by a wanderlust, or tribe should they be wastelanders, their identities can remain unbroken. However, should this delicate balance be disrupted, psychosis is soon to follow. With elves, one must expect the unexpected due to their poor mental stability. Elves possess a sense of honor, but only towards those who they consider their equals. This includes other elves, of course, but can also include or leave out anyone for various reasons. If you do make the cut, that hour of that day, that is, as an elven equal, then you are to be treated with classical concepts of honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, and virtue. If not an equal or of any use, then you become a quick victim of an elf raiding party. The mutant nature of Athos making elves equal to halflings or humans in both lifespan and magical resistance, that is to say, they have none. In addition to this, a flaw of the common elven personality is falling into addiction, Machiavellianism, sexual hedonism, and simple laziness if overly depressed. These flaws are obviously more common among city elves, or Jukate. This is because, after living in cities for so long, they will lose touch with their culture, thus any sense of elven honor, which seemingly was designed to prevent these very problems. The chief hero in their ancestor worship, known by all elven tribes, is that of Koranu Starchaser. Under him are the heroes of individual tribes and then venerable ancestors. Koranu was a talented thief or ranger and archetype who would later become a bardic figure using organ-shaped instruments common among elves today, while also teaching them to use the bow and hunt. He is regarded as the greatest elf to ever run, which is another way elves refer to living. As one can imagine, most elven leaders tend to be elders, and age plays an important role in hierarchy within any elven tribe. Fans of the Elder Scrolls will be interested to know that the common beasts which nomadic elven herders raise and breed are called kanks. They are insects which are a one-for-one of the Quama of Morrowind, the only difference being that these insects get much larger and can be trained for war if they are born into the soldier caste, while also being famed for their eggs as a source of food. Born from the romantic love affairs of elves and humans, half-elves are regarded as low status in both human and elf societies. The term Udran often being used among elves as a dehumanizing insult. As a result of their endless outsider status, those that are still alive by adulthood are driven by self-reliance. They will be exiled from elven society as soon as they are born, and can be the reason an elf becomes a city dweller to live with the human side of his or her family for the good of the child. As most grow into loners with a family history of mental illness, it is easy to imagine a half-elf serial killer. Being prone to the same Machiavellianism as their elven ancestors, all one must do is add to this antisocial personality disorder and self-obsession to get a full dark triad of attributes. In the cases when they do not succumb to a resentment for humanity and elves alike, half-elves can still live lucrative lives as traders or nomadic merchants like either side of their family. The elemental planes are strong in the wilds of Athos. Sadly, the same cannot be said for the ever-fading Feywild, which, like the flora of the planet itself, has all but eroded away. What remains of their pocket dimensions, or hidden realms, are regarded by the race of Feyfolk known as the Eladrin as the last vestiges of true civilization. This isolationist cultural conservatism means that the majority do not leave their realm. Contrary to their origins, the Eladrin refuse to use magic of any kind, hyper-specializing in psionics or the Way. These realms are vibrant, but incredibly small. What would be the size of an empire on a healthy planet may be the size of a small village in the lands within the wind. Eladrin are driven by a brutal sense of justice against most defilers. Other than their origins, it would be easy to mistake them for a more mutated elf with simply more vibrant features. Green or blue-colored skin might be more common among them, but who's to say they aren't just an odd-looking half-elf? Using this or a similar cover, the most common way to encounter an Eladrin would be to accidentally uncover their work as spies for their warrior monk-like people, who need to keep tabs on both the Veiled Alliance, which they would be allies with, as well as the Sorcerer Kings, to know when their treachery is so great that war, thus revealing their realm, can be risked for the good of nature. Of course, those who seek the dark powers of defiling magic will be automatic outsiders or escaped criminals avoiding execution for their crimes in Fey society in this world. Eladrin are different colors depending on their season, which we'll say still exist in their pocket oasis wilds. Winter are different shades of blue, autumn are red, summer are gold, and spring are green. With the tribal fracturing of the Eladrin, I want to say that each one has a different permanent season informing their look. This would go a long way to fleshing them out. I'd also like to limit the Fae in their dying wilds to only the smallest besides the Eladrin being left. We can integrate the old Seelie and Unseelie courts by having there be a wise woman priestess of each tribe who rules in oligarchies of a druidic three. To tie this into the cultural themes of the setting, we will reference Greek mythology by calling them the Fates, so sort of converting this more Celtic theme into a more Southern European or Greek one to fit within that setting. You know, Balak takes from Greece, and then we have things moving up, which ironically moves downward in real-world culture into North Africa, into India, into all these different places. There are many factors which must be considered when it comes to the elemental beings of Athas. First is that, as said previously, they have a very cramped, close connection to the planet. Second is that many of them are drunk on their own ego, being worshipped as gods. Third, and most importantly, there exists no sex drive stronger than that of a fire genie. As a result, a half-elemental is bound to appear. These beings are unmistakable, for their bodies literally resemble the element they are made of. In the world of Athas, the most common of these uncommon people would be silt, fire, magma, earth, sun, and wind. Water and rain being impossibly rare for obvious reasons. Depending on the community they were born into, Genasi can be wandering exiles, worshipped as demigods in a cult, or using their natural adaptation to the world of Athas, in many cases become great heroes of their local village. Regardless of circumstance, they would be seen as curiosities and oddities to all those they met. Refugees of the nightmare realms once called the Dreamlands, one could consider the Kalashtar both the children of and victims of the last of their older wicked kind. Very similar to H.P. Lovecraft's Dreamland setting, Athas has its own realm of dreams. In the case of Athasians, they either rest peacefully in a dreamless slumber or have gruesome nightmares. These nightmares are the result of Kashmar, the last of the powerful dreamfolk who feeds off of the dark nightmares of the innocent and the tragic suicides they cause. To escape living in this non-Euclidean neurotic animation, the last of the surviving Kalashtar live on in host bodies, which they possess in their sleep. For this reason, their physical appearance is of course very diverse, as their vessels are not their own. The host in this relationship is not silent. All Kalashtar are two souls in one. When in cooperation with each other, they make a powerful psionicist who can travel to what remains of the dreamlands of Athas at will. Other relationships are so one-sided, all the host can do is silently scream inside their head as their body is controlled by a foreign spirit. Despite the interference of the Grey, the plane of fire, which is very closely connected to the Nine Hells, makes an excellent entry point for devils to find their way to our dying world. Devils are those souls sent to hell who have gone through a metamorphosis of abnormal power as they are reborn under their founder's arrogant, most well-known quote, "Read the fine print." Devils make deals for souls, and the deals made with the beings who would later become the Tieflings of Athas were simply to be able to live on their dying world easier. When one understands the immunities devils have to this arid environment, the origins of Tieflings are not hard to imagine. The traditional tiefling appearance runs very strong here, as the red skin, brutal front horns, and other aspects of their demonic blood give them a powerful advantage over the rest of Athasians. However, still prone to resource scarcity, being stuck in fight-or-flight situations with their demonic blood driving them, most tieflings are tribal-raiding nomads. In a demonic rage, the tieflings take no prisoners, but kill all in their path for their water or food before moving on without leaving a trace of their existence behind. The devil's mind runs strong in them, as many who leave the life of tribal raiding behind find themselves as very successful slavers or merchants, a natural talent for deal-making inherent to their kin. Obviously, these deals can still be made today. As a result, tieflings of the non-traditional variety may be adopted by any Athasian culture, similar to half-giants we talked about previously. The prominence of Thri-Kreen bring an interesting aesthetic to bear when considering the idea of having ice devil-like blood, which itself has beetle or cockroach-like qualities. A white Thri-Kreen tiefling sounds incredibly cool to me. However, knowledge of tiefling culture on Athas, when running in old tribes, is very scarce. The 4th edition Dark Sun book talks about tieflings being caught between a redemptive road, being seemingly aware of their bedeviled origins, desiring to live by a higher code of honor, and those who wish to simply live hedonistically, as they believe they are hell-bound after death regardless. Obviously, most Athasian tieflings choose the latter path, given the brutal murder raids. If you're looking to flesh out tiefling culture, as they have their own nomadic tribal society, I would say give them a religious pantheon of worshipping the 9 lords of hell as gods, while also having contracts play a huge role in their culture. You can do anything to service greed, because that honors Mammon. But if you have made a contract with someone that you're not going to steal from them, and other tieflings find out that you did indeed steal from them, they'll wolf you down in a savage frenzy as a kind of tribal justice. You can effectively use the classic 7 deadly sins as a kind of hedonistic virtue list here as well: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth, respectively. This would give them a similar level of depth to the Athasian Elves, as they have a kind of honor culture provided a contract is present, but are also extremely dangerous if encountered in the world without one pertaining to members of that tribe. And I like the idea of having to deal legally with a group of savages. Like, the difference between savagery and civility is literally a contract. In addition, it keeps them original while also having them belong in the setting still, as while an Athasian elf might fall into addictive tendencies because they go away from their culture, traditional tiefling tribes would encourage an embracing of it actively as a matter of culture. As a final note, have them look forward to the idea of being taken to hell and becoming full devils themselves as a kind of twisted version of Valhalla when they die, seeing it as a great alternative to the Grey, with room for advancement. Aarakocra are most commonly the vulture-like bird folk of Athas, although any birds associated with desert environments which also have death symbolism would work as well, like crows or owls. The real thing to focus on when it comes to Aarakocra is their physiology and flight. The vulture folk are not angelic in body plan, but can more readily be compared to a werebird. They have hands at the ends of their long winged arms, which they use to fly, with their bestial feathers and features showing more prominently rather than being subdued by humanoid elements. They're divided into different tribes, which live at the top of mountains and range greatly in moral views of magic, although they are less hostile to it than humans. With that said, preservers still come into conflict with defilers, so those tribes would not be fond of each other. All Aarakocra have an inherent claustrophobia or fear of tight spaces. If they can help it, they will avoid entering caves or enclosed buildings to avoid increases in anxiety. This is likely because they spend most of their time in the air. From this vantage point, they act as scouts for their tribes, which they very rarely leave. Their tribe is their nation, and they are very patriotic, happily dying to defend their extended families. Traveling Aarakocra have a distinct advantage over others when traversing the world, as their flying allows them to move faster than their ground-bound companions. To those that choose a nomadic life, it is usually one of raiding and banditry. They will prey upon the peoples of the earth and take what they want. Regardless of morality, most of them have a religion revolving around the worship of air or sun as an element. Aarakocra tribes have a mixed view of gender roles, with tribes having to face harsher circumstances being patriarchal, while tribes more decadent in culture being more egalitarian. The Giants of Athos are no stranger to mutation. On some island in the Silt Sea, this has resulted in animal-headed beast giants based on extinct races of DNA left behind by certain animals, mixed with psionic mutations. This can include serpents, lions, and in the case of our current subject, bulls. A particular island of bull-headed beast giants were captured and experimented on by a cult of defilers, seeking to surpass the Sorcerer Kings of the Tyr region by harnessing elemental powers through them. They succeeded in creating a slave race of beastmen, known as Minotaur. After this ancient cult was destroyed, the Minotaur of Athos were left to the fates of their giant kin, becoming raiders of the endless wasteland. However, in the case that one of these bovine kin can pull themselves away from their savage desire for destruction or rampage, they will seek out a civilized life. In this way, we can see them as another take on the half-giant, ultimately adopting the culture of the local civilization, but in place of a jovial, eager-to-please childlike nature of Goliaths, we get a being that will happily engage in brutal mayhem if given anything even remotely resembling a chance. This makes them perfect for gladiator arenas. Given their backstory, the only thing I would add to flesh out the Minotaur would be selecting or making an island on the map that is the designated homeland of their people, holding the hidden ruins of their ancient creator cult. Given that there is no information on their views of magic, and that we have yet to really find a race that is distinctly defiling all the time, I would say use their reckless nature to inform their views of magic. They don't care about the cost of power, only that the power flows through them in the rare cases when they are intelligent enough to learn magic. They were created with spell casting in mind, after all. Every race on Athos has their own way of adapting to the harsh realities of this mad land. For the Thri, their ability to withstand disease has allowed these rat folk to fill the role of scavenger. Food and water that would be indigestible for human or beast stomachs due to rot or disease provides the perfect level of nutrients for Thri physiology. Survivors of the wars of extermination against the champion Khalid Ma, called Thri Killer, who would later be killed by his fellow champions, the ancient Thri, had a high culture of complex druidism. Today, this culture lives on in a more barbaric form through their animistic view of the world. Their lives are filled with war, as they are usually weak creatures who are easily hunted by other races while being regarded as an infestation by humanity. They grow to a max height of around 5 feet tall, with 2-foot-long tails, having different shades of brown to white fur depending on the family line. They are known for their cowardice, as they will not attack any creature larger than a human and will follow the injured in hopes of robbing them after death. The chiefs and warriors of their tribes, when they actually manage to produce them, are heavily prized as precious important leaders, marked with decorative headdresses and jewelry made of bone or metal when rarely found. The largest colony of ratkin are part of the Ythri colony, being led on a pilgrimage to reclaim the ruins of their once thriving nation before the current state of the world under the guidance of their ancestor-worshipping druid prophet, Rinch Whitefang. Depending on the DM's choice, they can either be away from the setting, as they have already left, or actively recruiting Thri from southern Tyr around the outskirts of Balak. A truly unique figure obsessed with godhood, the reason Dregoth, who was once called Ravager of Giants, did not succeed with his given mission is that he was too busy researching how to attain his highly unorthodox goals. Mixing the path of lichdom with the transformation into a dragon that many have sought after before him, he now rests smugly immortal in between the two states, with powers only he truly understands. In his path to this state long ago, he created 2 types of human-dragon hybrids, referred to as generations of Dray. Originally thriving in the now-destroyed city-state of Guistanol, after what many believe to be the assassination of Dregoth, only few of his master race would survive. From these ancient survivors arose the slaving, Machiavellian, and sorceress race we know of today. All Dray have a much higher heat resistance than humans, being twice as tough in the face of the dark sun. As all Dray are made for nocturnal living, as evidenced by their natural night vision, Dray are easily blinded by bright lights, and a drawback to their heat resistance is a weakness to cold. They and their cousin race range from 6 to 8 feet in height. The first generation Dray were similar to this model, though not exact, as they were horribly deformed as if poisoned in the womb. Their scales grow unevenly, patches of far too human skin are present, and their backs are hunched. In addition to this, they're heavily prone to being born with random mutations, causing the race of mad, savage, mystic barbarians to become raiders through the land. If you ever encounter a Dray, more out for blood than profit, he is likely a spawn of the first generation, which we could call Brute Dray for short. These Dray are more numerous, as they were banished before the fall of Gwistanol. They embrace a neutral warrior's honor culture. As rejects of their master, they do not carry his narcissism or his prejudices, being solely concerned with matters within the tribe. Far sleeker, elegant, and arrogant than their first-generation cousins, the second-generation Dray are truly the heirs to Dregoth's legacy of power and search for godhood. Despite their draconic appearance, second-generation Dray are said to be appealing to the eye, noticeably wearing the vicious features of terrifying monstrosity in a noble or regal way to invoke a sense of handsomeness or predatory beauty. Perfect sharp teeth and polished long claws augment a perfectly symmetrical snout accompanied by eyes filled with the potential for dark magic. Part of their origins make second-generation, or noble Dray, a very endangered people who live in tight-knit family structures that assumedly resemble the noble family structures of a city-state. We have to remember, in this setting, these aren't necessarily dragonborn, these are Dray, which are humans who have undergone what they view as a holy transformation long ago in their ethnic history. Their main source of income is often through the slave trade, and they also view the practice of defiling magic as commonplace. Noble sorcerer clans construct large citadels and towers in the wastes to serve as their lairs, bases of operation, and homes. Their extravagant wealth matched only by their egos. They consider humans to be idiots, and other races to be their obvious inferiors. A nobleman would be taken back by being seen as nothing more than a mentally ill, low-born person worthy of pity in the eyes of these beings. More humane Dray who reject the slave trade embrace a much softer form of slavery called usury. They act as moneylenders, loan sharks, and power-broking speculators who heavily influence the ability of merchant companies to prosper based on their recommendations. These families make a point of seeking out their local larger government, whether it be a city-state or other form of civilization, to bribe or buy their way into licenses to practice their magic in those areas free of Templar interference. The last job of a Dray is that of a sorcerer for hire. At the risk of mockery from their family, this is the only time we get the possibility of a Dray being a preserver instead of a defiler. The second-generation Dray worship the memory of Dregoth, who they believe dead, as a god figure who made them into his chosen people. One of the two types of lizard folk on the planet are the Paterans, who descended from a dinosaur-like lineage appearing as wingless pterodactyl men. Neighbors of the Halflings near the forest ridge, Paterans are known for their inability to communicate due to their highly unique language. This leads to conflicts with many around them, as well as being victims of Halfling raiding parties. Their more savage flying cousins, who they are in constant war with for survival, are the Pitarax. Much of the lore on Paterans is up to the DM, as their description focuses more on their physiology, which we'll go over here. They have short stubs on their back where the wings of their ancestors once were, clubbed tails about the size of their leg, and longer than average proportional arms, with 3 fingers and 1 thumb. Their heads are that of a pterodactyl, with more bulbous human eyes, with a focus around describing their large, jagged, sharp teeth. Since this race lives near the Halflings and clearly evolved from the most savage monster variants surrounding them, it would be useful to use the relation between dinosaurs and birds to create a lineage offshoot of the Aarakocra long ago, who devolved into the Pitarax, only to re-evolve with the loss of flight into the Paterans as a result of needing to be better fighters on the ground against the Halflings, who for some reason were very good at killing them in ways relating to their flight. I would say that despite the Halflings in the modern age being anti-defiling, give them some time back then when they were very pro-defiling and they were good at magic that took people out of the sky. This gives them a history, and we can substitute sun and air clerics in their religion for silt and earth, as they are the corresponding elemental planes in Dark Sun lore. These elements also work to give their closeness to the forest and silt sea a sense of more, deeper meaning in that way. They could mimic the patriarchal family structure of the Aarakocra who live in harsher environments. The second type of lizard folk who truly live up to the title are the fin-spined, muscular Saurons. Traditionalist barbarians, hunters, and shamans, these lizard men are harsh cultural conservationists. The importance of staying true to their heritage is informed by their nomadic tribal nature. Their fashion is a matter of bone-crafted jewelry for hunters and shamans alike, accompanied by a simple loincloth. Most of their weapons are also made of bone, and it is said that in some rare cases, Sauron travel alone. Their children are prized as exotic slaves or attractions. As this is all the lore has to say on them, it is best to take tribal animistic traditions found in Neanderthal societies who are theorized to worship cave bears and apply them to different animals unique to Athos. Having them worship a great kank, fire drake, or crudlu would both flesh them out with a simple, more Darwinistic but still empathetic morality, while also blending them into the world, making them feel far less tacked on. It would also give them an inherent friendliness with the other beast folk or nature-driven races and a hatred for humans, Dray, or any other people who profit from civilization or, of course, slavery. Their children are prized as exotic slaves. I would give them to animal spirits, or rather, give their religion an animal spirit feel. And I would take the animal spirits from Conan lore, but changed for this setting. Hanuman, a demon ape god, and the Great Bear. When we mix these two, we get a religion of human sacrifice, hatred of civilization, and protection for anyone they consider to be part of their tribe or extended family. In this case, we'll be making the ape into a fire drake, which in the Dark Sun setting resemble fire-breathing T-Rex, to inform the wrath of nature against civilization, and the Great Bear with an earth drake, which has a similar big protective look, but seems like a hulking walking mountain. It still gives off the same archetypal feel, though. Sun and rain drakes could also be incorporated, as their main attack is called a sun curse. However, any animal unique to the world would work. Drakes simply work best because they obviously bear a close resemblance to the Saurons themselves, while also being elementals that haven't really had time to shine yet. As they aren't related at all to the Sorcerer Kings and would oppose them by culture, it would create an interesting dynamic. For a more grimdark feel, you could say to appease their fire drake version of Hanuman, they must burn a civilized person alive as a sacrifice to appease the beast for protection of the tribe. And of course, that desire for their children as exotic slaves can be incorporated into this because it's also viewed as a protection of the children by burning, say, a Dray or a human alive. That would be very interesting. Last, and with the least amount of lore in Dark Sun, are the Yuan Ti. They are only mentioned by language in the 2nd edition core book, with no lore whatsoever about them in detail. Due to this, DMs have total control over how to integrate them, if at all, into their campaign. The Yuan Ti are the Serpent Men of D&D, and I mean that literally. Much of their lore could simply be described as a high fantasy interpretation of Robert E. Howard's Serpent Men. They have a distinct hatred for humanity, are descendants of a god literally called Set, just spelled differently, and practice misanthropic rituals in service to dark powers. Let's adapt the existing Yuan Ti lore, with inspiration from their literary inspirations, to fill in the blanks here. As they are usually depicted in tropical environments, a good location for their civilization would be the as-of-yet unexplored ruins of the Forest Ridge, making them the only other true denizens within the land other than Halflings. We could also put their civilization as a border group in between the Paterans, who live on the edge of the forest, and the Halflings, who dominate its surface. A chief goal of these serpent folk, which makes them very complementary to the setting, is their desire for godhood through the subjugation of all other races. To begin, similar to their normal D&D origins, they will be humans who worship serpents as totem animals. Upon learning of the draconic transformation of the Sorcerer Kings, especially that of the Dray, these people considered it sacrilege against their great serpent totem, who we will call Set. We'll say that that's spelled S-E-T, like the Conan Set. As this happened, the events which made Athos as they are today occurred. They eventually retreated to their last remaining city in what would later become the Forest Ridge of the region of Tyr. Here, through their own study of defiling magic, which they used to breed with snakes, just like in the normal lore, they hope to undergo their own version of the draconic transformation and become gods who walk upon the earth in a more true divine form. Of course, true divine form in this context meaning Big Snake Man, or Big Snake. This ties the Yuan Ti desire for godhood with the Conan or Cthulhu mythos Serpent Men's inherent misanthropy, and a nice tight lore bow. This also helps us adapt the caste system of the Yuan Ti into something more reflective of the various different stages of Athasian dragon transformations. Bringing in a bit of the Setites from the old world of darkness, this would make them more of a cultural cult or religion than a genetic people. One element I really like fusing, and this of course melds well with the inherent misanthropy of the Conan Snakemen, is the idea of the Setite cult or the cathedral or the Church of Set or whatever they're calling it in New World of Darkness, that ultimately embraces the idea of you taking a person, getting them to throw away all their moral boundaries, all their inhibitions, basically destroying their disgust sensitivity as a form of liberation, and depending on how grimdark you want your game to be, you could absolutely add elements of that and take that in any direction your players can be comfortable with without having a mental breakdown. The belief in cannibalizing and killing all those who refuse to ascend with them also being a part of their original D&D origins. The eating of one's enemies, or non-believers, being an ultimate sign of their might or superiority. Depending on the level a Yuan Ti is at within their esoteric order of Set, they will take on a different body plan due to the secret rituals relating to Serpent Men mutation. That's how we'll incorporate the different kinds of serpent folk into our setting. And for the more sort of amorphic, weird, and abomination-looking, not to be confused with the actual caste abomination, but more twisted and non-Euclidean, let's say, forms that some of the Yuan Ti will take into account the idea that some of these rituals go wrong and they create these kind of monstrous half-serpent men where half their body is literally writhing snakes and the other half is human cut down the middle. At the bottom are new converts, who are still pure-blooded humans, accurately called purebloods, as they have only begun to mutate, starting to grow scales, fangs, or eyes of the serpent men. Malisons are the caste above them, which resemble a serpent-headed man similar to how a bull's features rest on the human body of a Minotaur. We'll add a third caste here, which we will call a Damned One, which is fitting, as the previous state Malison means curse. A Damned One will resemble the Conan Serpent Men, being the same as the Malison except for the whole body being covered in scales. After this is the Abomination, in which the lower body transforms into that of a serpent's. The only humanoid elements remaining at this point being the shape of the torso and arms. Finally, we'll add a fifth caste. This final form will simply be a giant intelligent serpent, who, as a reverse engineering of this process, produces venom, which is a key ingredient in the transformation rituals to ascend further in divine form until one takes on the highest form, which we will call a Setite, after their animal totem god. A religious oligarchy of these intelligent giant serpents will make up the governing body of their city and, of course, will be worshipped as living gods. We'll say that a council of 5 of them equals the power of one Sorcerer King. Not a powerful one, but enough for them to be considered competitors to their claims of godhood. We can say they grow their ranks from recruiting misanthropes from humans, halflings, and Baterans as converts, as well as people being born to certain castes due to their parents' involvement in the cult. At least this is my unique take on the Yuan Ti for this setting. Other people make them denizens of the moon, that's cool too. If you can think of a race we haven't talked about on this list that would work well in Dark Sun, don't worry, the 2E core rulebook gives DMs a quick and easy guide for including them into the world of Athas. The first option is to simply say they are a mutated offshoot of an existing creature or sentient race of Athas which adapted to new living conditions. The second is to say they were the result of magical experiments, and the final one is to have them be a secretive underground race, which little is changed for given their lack of interaction with the world above ground. My personal advice will be to take inspiration from the literary inspirations which inspired this setting. Conan, the Barsoom series, Dune, Mad Max, and others should be your contextual lens used to reinterpret your favorite races. A great example of this would be a magical experiment to create a warrior race by reviving the orcs going wrong, creating carbon copies of the 4-armed green Martians from Princess of Mars, which already look like 4-armed orcs anyway with bulging red eyes. You could say they have a bit of Thri-Kreen in them as well. I hope this video was helpful, and if so, please subscribe to our channel and return for more Dark Sun lore. We also have an active Discord now you can find in the description box below, right under our giant source list, which is clearly labeled to help you find articles, videos, or in this case PDFs, to help you do research on these subjects as well. Thank you for watching, don't forget to drink some water, and have a lovely day.